Thank you very much. Lovely to see you all this morning in whatever guise that is. My name is Nick Ponsford and I am the co-founder of the Global Equality Collective. What we were going to talk about for the next half an hour is going to talk about gender representation, but maybe take that out a little bit further to bring in some of the stories that have been out this week about skills gaps and kind of where we are in a mid lockdown state as we are. So I've brought a couple of my colleagues from GEC Futures, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. So what I wanted to do is just talk to you about the work that we've been doing, and then I'll put some bits and pieces in the chat. I'll speak to our panelists this morning on a number of topics, but please feel free to jump into the chat and add any kind of reflections or comments. I'd really like to hear what you have to say on this as well. So Global Equality Collectives were set up by me and my co-founder 3 years ago. My background is that I've worked in education for about 20 years. I spent 10 years in a classroom as a digital multimedia teacher, doing everything from sort of BTECs and A-levels and GCSEs. I was an examiner. I did some quite exciting things, like did a trip to Los Angeles with my students. We washed a lot of cars for 18 months and won a teaching award. And at that point, I was able to write and teach at the same time. And that's what I've continued to do. So a lot of the work I do now is around teacher training. What I realised as I was teaching digital media, we had what felt quite an exciting time. I started teaching just before the iPods and iPhones came in, and I was quite fortunate to be at the front of that kind of wave. It allowed me to kind of look at how we could bring in digital pathways for students, but also where the gaps were with teachers' dispositions and skills with technology. As a result of that, I was asked an awful lot, like, where were the women in technology? How could we make technology more inclusive? And so I wanted to do something about it. I felt a lot of the ways that business were engaging with the educational sector were a little bit tokenistic. Someone standing on the stage saying that we're going to do great things, but it wasn't really reaching the students. So I wanted to do two things. First, I wanted to give more visibility and help amplify amazing technologists, in brackets, who happen to be women or of minority groups. And I also wanted to kind of help teachers who felt they weren't technologists be more confident in what they were doing. And as part of that work, we created GEC Futures with a focus on women in tech. And I'm absolutely thrilled, from when we launched as a little idea and a few of us kind of messaging each other, has now grown. We have over 30 incredible technologists in the group. We stormed BET when we were allowed to go there, and we were told we were the best that they'd seen, which was amazing. We've also written a lot of online courses and done panels such as this, working with partners such as TechPathways over the last few years, which is fantastic. And also it's enabled us to do networking around the sides and help signpost and learn from other people in our group as well. GEC Futures is just launching this month our next project, which is Boys Retreat, and we are going to look at things like toxic masculinity, but also challenge why the literacy gap has stayed there for boys and girls since the 1960s. We obviously bring in intersectionality into everything. The Global Equality Collective looks at the 9 characteristics of Equalities Act, post socioeconomic status and single parents, and we run that through all our work. So that's me. You can find out more about the GEC, and I hope you will come and join us on our online communities. And if you'd like to be part of our gang, join the collective as well, would be absolutely fantastic. And I'll put those details in. So I have brought 3 incredible people with me today. So I'm going to go round and introduce them, and then we're going to get on with our questions. So I can see Holly. So Holly, would you like to introduce yourself first, please?
Absolutely, yeah. Can you all hear me okay? Excellent. That's great. So my name's Holly. I'm the founder of Online Media Law UK. And what I basically do is go round secondary schools, but also sixth form colleges, universities and workplaces, teaching people about social media law and ethics. So there's a lot of stuff already being done in education around online safety, cyberbullying, things like that. But I noticed there was a gap where not many people were talking about law, legal rights, risks and responsibilities, and what even is a crime on social media and online. So that's kind of my specialism. And I've also got a PhD from City University, where I've done research with teenagers about what they think is or isn't risky on social media too.
Thank you very much, Holly. And Holly is on Twitter as well, and is always showing us what's going on in that space. As a digital media teacher, it was absolutely crucial that we looked at online safety and online safeguarding. And I was really passionate about bringing the law into the classroom. I think in the last few years, there is a greater understanding of that, but I still feel more could be more teaching around that. So Holly is a great person to go to. So we'll come back to you in a sec, Holly. I can see we've got Kaz over there. Kaz, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody see me and hear me? Excellent. Right. Caroline Keep. So I am the director of the first makerspace in a school in the UK. I'm also a part-time technologist, part-time educationalist at the moment. So I'm a bit in both worlds. So I do a lot of work with schools and teachers regarding setting up makerspaces and digital pathways in schools. I also work with a lot of companies regarding the technology that's going into schools, specifically hardware and electronics. And at the moment, I'm doing a lot of machine learning research, so that's been thoroughly entertaining me in lockdown. But yeah, that's kind of the kind of things that I do across schools and across tech, and I'm very, very passionate about the GEC and very, very passionate about inclusion, you know, so especially in the tech field.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. And Jade, would have been nice for you to make an effort today, Jade. Look at that. Look at all the comments about her pink hair. Absolutely fantastic.
Oh, I've not noticed them. Oh, wow. Hello. Hello, everybody. My name's Jade. I am the founder of STEAM School. My background originally started in technology, and then it was a very happy accident that I somehow became a school leader. So that began about 15 years ago with one of the first Tony Blair academies here in Liverpool. I then went on to be a deputy head. I then bid to open 2 more schools in Liverpool, one of which was a school for video gamers. And that led me to where I am today. So STEAM School is an online platform community for schools. We introduce them to some of the biggest names in tech and some great entrepreneurs. So we've worked with people like Google, Facebook, Epic Games, Pokemon Go, whole host of Virgin Galactic, whole host of people. But our aim really is to inspire young people and to give them opportunities to develop those future-ready skills.
Thank you very much, Jade. And I think we'll go straight in with our questions now. So I'll keep with you, Jade, for a sec. So what I want to start off, because we were asked to talk about gender representation, I thought it would be good to look at it under, you know, the guise of STEAM as well. And just, Jade, why do you think there is a gap, and what kind of things do you think we can do about it?
So we're talking about gaps specifically in education or in the wider STEAM sector?
Whatever you want.
Okay, let's talk about education then. So I was trying to reflect on my own experiences in schools and looking at all of the different types of teachers that I've worked with in kind of science and technology, and why some of those teachers then don't go on to be kind of, you know, have careers as tech educators. And I don't know whether it's something that is as women, either, you know, we become the primary caregivers for our children. Teaching already is a massively stressful career and people work really long hours. And I think to make that progression into this world that actually all 4 of us have made it into, so, you know, well done, it takes a huge amount of commitment and time. For me, I made the leap to create the time. So I had I've got a little boy who's now 10. when he was about to go to school, I knew I had to leave school life because I wanted to be able to pick my son up from school every day. I think I lasted a year as a school leader before I just left, because I wanted to create that balance in my life. So I think a lot of women, perhaps struggle with that balance. And then, whilst I think there's loads of men out there who are hugely supportive of women, and I can give you so many people have helped me on my journey in the past few years, but I do also think that there tends to be a little bit of a boys club as well. We've created our own girls club, which is brilliant, but I do think that boys club exists, and they all tend to kind of use and refer to each other for the projects, and that doesn't help. However, I am so grateful to have Nick in my life, because she brings me to things like this, which is awesome, and we need more of that in education.
Thank you, Jade. And do you know what? I'd agree with you. I think there was a little bit that I felt when I went to that vet, all puffy faced after just having the twins. I was quite shocked with the lack of diversity, and not just gender, but in terms of race, in terms of kind of social economic status. And a lot of people knew each other. And I think you still do find, when you look at the kind of digital circuits and the EdTech circuits, that there is still a kind of network that runs. This year, with my other side, I've been part of the EdTech Demonstrator programme, and I've been really pushing that we get a kind of multitude of voices out. And because it's peer-to-peer led and led by demonstrator schools, that is great. And we are, getting those sort of new faces, but the people in those roles do tend to still be a certain demographic. And I think what we try to do at the GEC is help with that kind of, cradle through. So, I've got twins, I've got a boy and a girl, and we really are very aware of books that talk about spacemen and about those kind of role models. We've got a whole best books list on the GEC website, because we think this is really key, and that we think that little girls should be encouraged into these roles just as the boys. And also, I'll go to our next panelist to talk about this a bit as well. I do think that there have been kind of confidence gaps around female teachers with technology, and I think that doesn't help the subject, and it doesn't help the learners as well. Kaz, can I bring you in on this now? Because I think that might be something you want to add.
Yeah. What do I want to talk about today? Today, Caroline's bugbear is, I think with this, there's several, going on. When you see it going through a school and you teach as many children as I do, and you've kind of got a foot in both worlds, I think one of the biggest problems I see in getting young girls and young people, especially from kind of diverse backgrounds, everything from SEN through, you have a big problem, I think, with language. Let's talk about language. Tech has a real language problem, absolutely a real language problem.
Yep.
And I think how we teach the curriculum needs to be really thought carefully through. So, I'm a physics background, but do IT teaching. And we have a big thing over, learning the scientific vocabulary in schools, but we very rarely learn the tech vocabulary to go with this. So when we teach things like computer science, we fail to equip our young people for it. And boys, I think, cope better with the kind of tech jargon that we hear on a regular basis than girls do. So I think one of the big things you can do if you're trying to get young people into is demystify the jargon. That's a basic thing that you can do to get young people into it. We're not seeing enough girls come through, especially in things like computing. It's still only 17%. And when you get to things like where I'm trying to tackle at the moment, machine learning, it's dropping down to 14% in cloud computing, only 7.9% of Slack Overflow kind of code commits are women. So we're not doing it. And I think one of the big things I've noticed is there's a barrier to language. And it seems to be that it's set up to, I don't think deliberate, but it's set up to exclude certain types.
I think you're right. I was talking to someone the other day, actually for the National Cybersecurity Council, and they were sort of obviously looking at the numbers of trying to get more girls in particular and minority groups into computer science at GCSE. And I think the fact that it's called computer science is a barrier in itself. And I know in my roles, I have been an e-learning person, I've been a digital, I've been a tech person, and it's almost like we can't quite decide on what it is. Whereas actually my background is digital multimedia. And if you put a lot of the media literacy words into it, it becomes a lot more appealing. I can see Holly nodding, so I might bring you in here too. What would you say, Hol?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think that's a really kind of important point. I was going to talk a bit about online and social media and kind of some of the gender issues there. So this kind of feeds in quite nicely. Kind of in terms of what the problems are, I do think we have to acknowledge that people's perceptions and also their experiences kind of online and in digital do differ along the grounds of gender, and we do need to kind of look at some of those. So I think, you know, my own research was doing focus groups in schools with teenagers, and I found even amongst that there were differences between what a group of all girls thought was risky to post online versus what mixed gender groups thought were risky to post online, for example, particularly with kind of gendered offences like kind of sometimes called revenge porn or image-based abuse, upskirting, cyber flashing, those kinds of things, and misogyny and sexism online. So that's really, really interesting and important to kind of to look at. And obviously we have had a lot of discussion recently about women's safety, and I think we do need to talk about women's safety and well-being online and in digital spaces as well. You know, and I think victim blaming narratives from the research, it shows they are still quite common. So women and girls who put themselves out there online, who are vocal and active online, you know, there is a perception of kind of, you know, what do you expect? You're putting yourself in the firing line. And I think as Nick has rightly mentioned as well, we do really need an intersectional approach to this. I don't know whether anyone saw the report that came out from Evor and Glitch UK about lockdown and online abuse towards women, but that's a really great report. I'll pop that in the chat as I've got a load of links of research that might be useful. But they found that since COVID, basically, you know, online abuse and harassment has gone up towards women, but it's particularly women of colour, women with disabilities, you know, women who are Muslim, who are gay, who are non-conforming to gender stereotypes, who are the ones who are kind of disproportionately being targeted. So I think there's also broader things as well. Like I saw a slightly worrying news report from The Guardian as well about just the fact that the girls were doing more housework than boys now that they were all at home together all day, right? So you can see how that impacts all sorts of areas of their life, you know, education, things like that. So this is a kind of broader issue about, we do need to tackle some of the sort of broader gender inequalities that then also manifest online. I think what I would say, I talk to lots of parents and staff as well who are really anxious about young people being online and on social media. And I think sometimes social media kind of can become the enemy, the baddie in itself. And I would say, you know, it's not the enemy. And I think we have to remember how incredibly useful social media and digital technology have been for feminism, for digital feminisms. You know, there's some amazing stuff going on, you know, people using it to build support networks, to make their voices heard, to share their experiences, to connect, to demand change. So I think that's really good. And I know there's also some good work being done, I think, around looking at how we can fix some of these issues, particularly within legal, policing and enforcement as well. So that's kind of my bugbear. If I was going to have a bugbear, is that often people think the internet is a wild west with no rules. And actually, I think the problem is we do have things that are illegal and that cross the line online, but people don't, or it's not always enforced and people don't always know about it. So I do think it's interesting the government's looking at measuring hate incidents on the grounds of sex and gender for the first time, kind of experimentally. So that'd be very interesting to see just as a measurement of that, if that makes a difference. And also the Law Commission is currently reviewing digital offences as well. And they're specifically, I'm actually doing a consultation with them next week on this, but they are looking specifically at digital offences, online abuse, hate incidents, and image-based offences as well. But as always, I think the solution is always representation, equality, diversity, inclusion, because, you see what happens when we don't have women in the room. We had that awful idea from Australia, didn't we, about the consent app? I don't know if anyone saw that as well. Somebody suggested that the way to prevent sexual assault would be to develop an app where you could log someone's consent, and you just think, okay, so they've not got anyone in the room there who understands the issues to tackle that. So these are social issues as well. And I would say, even if you don't want to work in tech, actually, you want to work in law, politics, media, business, finance, because these all affect how tech is developed, funded, regulated, marketed, promoted. So it's a deep part of our society and our social lives now. It's not even really just about tech. So that's my sort of that's my soapbox today. But I'll share some useful links on the chat of some of those things I mentioned.
Yes, please, Holly, that would be great. We'll go to Kaz and then over to Jade, I think, to carry that.
I'm just going to carry on from Holly though. One of the things I'm really passionate about, and Holly is as well, is educating young people in the law. So things like having part of your school or your enrichment or your outreach or your summer program, having part of it to include that kind of online behavior that you want to see, understanding fake news, understanding social media. These kinds of things need to be built into our curriculum and our expectations. And as I say, with kind of getting their language, getting young women into tech isn't hard when you kind of strip away the fear of that language to it. So we have like our makerspace, and I teach Java, I teach Python, I teach all the kind of code, I teach all the kind of very STEM skills, but it isn't pitched to them like that. We have a digital pathway that does all kinds. And some of the things that we cover are things like, how to stay safe online, e-safety, how to look after your own data. As a 14-year-old, it's really important that they know these things, because quite often when I get them in year 7, they have no idea, what they signed up to when they said yes to that app. And that should be concerning for all of us. So having those kinds of legal things built in to your curriculum much more broadly than we do now is a really good thing to do. And just having it doesn't always have to be delivered in computing. It can be delivered in a range of other ways, and then you can outreach it to other areas. And I think Caitlin will be able to show you later. We did one as the GEC in tech outside the classroom, of which I talk extensively on how to set up your own makerspace and your own pathway. So the training's there. It's just basically extending it out a bit more. And making it more accessible for everybody, so that they really can get the kind of information that they need in this day and age.
Absolutely. And I think, it seems crazy, doesn't it, that talking about netiquette, which in 2021, particularly after the last year, still is something that I don't know if there's a kind of lack of responsibility within school. People don't kind of know where it sits properly, but there is still a real gap. And I think part of that is the fear, as kind of Holly said. I think parents are fearful because they don't feel they understand the codes and what's right, and they might worry more about a particular app rather than the code of conduct within it, or where to kind of look. And then teachers haven't had that training around the importance of law. And there is actually a law, as Holly is always, there is a law there to protect us, but you need, to either speak to someone, like Holly, who does this professionally and can help you in education, or you need to be, a bit more confident to have a look around. Jay, do you want to come back in on this?
So a couple of thoughts, remarks have been sparked from both Caroline and Holly. So first of all, I loved what Caroline said about having a digital pathway. And I think that actually maybe if we pitch STEAM more as STEM, so it's got that kind of creativity in there as well, and arts, that is a way to kind of, make all of those science and technical subjects a little bit more accessible to two children. Interestingly, yesterday, I mean, what we do at STEAM School is we bring in the real world science and tech and show children how, science and technology is powering what they do every day. And I had a conversation yesterday with a university careers team who said, oh, fashion, there's no STEAM in fashion. And I was like, oh my gosh, like those, fashion designers, men, girls, whatever, they will use material science, dye chemistry, there's engineering to make all the stuff. It's everywhere. So that shocked me. I'm still in shock 24 hours later, those poor students. But so yes, and then my other thought was about what Holly was saying about lockdown learning. So I have a boy. He's not really been a fan of lockdown learning, I've got to be honest. It's just not been for him. However, he has now become this kind of, in the end, a real creative little genius. He's drawing, he's writing. It's been brilliant. I've got loads of friends who have girls, and they've actually really, really loved lockdown learning. They've loved the fact that they can just get on with the work. And I wonder whether, because they're not exposed to those gender stereotypes, if they haven't been for a year, whether or not that will impact the uptake on those science and tech pathways. Will it make any, difference to their future aspirations? I'd love to see some research on that area.
That is a really interesting point. And I think where we know that tech can be more of an equalizer because we're all behind a screen and you're not worried about those sort of socialization skills, there are students that have thrived. I know that Harmeet in our GEC collective, he had a student he put online, he said online in a tweet about how they'd thrived at home. And it got, it's got hundreds and hundreds of likes from other teachers who realise this with their students. And I think lockdown has produced maybe surprises with how not only have the teachers have performed, but actually how the students have engaged with learning and maybe learning away from the curriculum as well. I know other students that have maybe done a lot more drawing or a lot more Lego or a lot more reading than they would have done, because obviously they've not been able to go outside as much. So no, I absolutely agree with you, Jade. I think what we'll do just for the last few minutes, because when I do a session, I always want people to come away and think, what can they do? I think we've talked about the use of language. So I think how you engage both teachers and students with the use of language around technologies is really important. I absolutely agree. I think the other side that we've also brought out is that kind of exposure to understanding the law around social media and what you're using as well. We've talked very briefly there, Jade, about the impact of lockdown on tech uptake. I've put a couple of articles in the chat as well about the digital skills shortage, which we are seeing against a backdrop of how we've all networked and worked collaboratively online for the last year as well. But I just wondered, as a sort of part thing, what would you encourage teachers to do to help themselves and students? Kaz, what would you say first?
I'd, as I said, take your tech, take your computer science, take your STEMs, take your STEAMs, take your art, and take it out of your traditional siloed subjects. As I said, we've all done a tech outside the classroom one, and that's a course that's on Tech Pathways that you can use and set yourself up, an enrichment makerspace or a club that they can go to, and make it more wide ranging, so that it's not just narrowly appealed to one demographic, and try and include it in your lunch times or break times. You can do this online. We ran ours online when we were all in lockdown, and you can get students to build things creatively and use different digital skills that way, instead of it being very, narrowly at code, and make sure that you have that language that's really, explained well. Explain it like a science teacher. If you don't know what I mean, go find your science teacher. What do they do with their vocabulary? Make sure you're kind of doing a similar thing, so that you're not just running through something in a computer science lesson and then you thought everybody understood what you meant by this particular, abbreviation, and then you realize that people don't. So, make sure that you kind of have got that vocabulary is strong, so that you've got those glossaries down, you've got that, that direct instruction in language, and make sure that you can extend those kind of enriching activities outside. It's the best way to get enthusiasm for tech. How we're supposed to teach, especially computer science in the GCSE curriculum is depressing. We all know it's depressing. So trying to get that kind of enthusiasm for it has to come from outside of it. So, once you've got that enthusiasm, you'll find that girls are really, really good like that. And we just, sorry, I feel like I'm giving a list of my life.
No,
we just touched as well on that accessibility. Try and make sure that you get that accessibility right. I'm an SEN student, and a lot of SEND students are excellent coders. They're absolutely brilliant. But the way that we're taught, and it'll be the same for everybody thinks this across teaching, you've got to chunk that kind of activities down, break it down into those pieces for us, because online learning has been great for some of us, but I think for some of my students it's been quite a struggle, especially those dyslexic students like me. Trying to continuously have it online is quite a task. So make sure that you're breaking it apart and making it those smaller chunks that are easier to understand, so that they can access it as well. It just makes all the difference, especially online.
No, I agree. And I do actually think there's a slight argument there as well of working out when screens work better or not. I've got a 10-year-old, he's autistic, home learning wasn't for him, and he was in school, and he worked better in school. That's how he works. But online, he likes being creative. So he doesn't like it for schoolwork, but he likes it for creativity. And I think that's where education kind of needs to evolve to, of we work out what suits the students at particular times and how they can best learn, and we adapt. And it's not a one or the other, it's kind of in the middle. I've been saying I think that the education system's got growing pains at the moment as we're kind of working out where we want to be. The other thing I was going to say, that Kaz sort of mentioned about how sometimes the boys is kind of more equipped with that language. I know having even magazines like Whiz Pop Bang and starting to get the kind of more gender neutral science and those kinds of conversations can mean that girls are more confident and more used to using that language, rather than choosing some of the magazines and the media types which don't really bring that in as much. I mean, there is more now, as you see sort of like bits and bobs and all that kind of stuff on CBeebies, but I think sometimes you have to kind of force it a little bit at the moment to make sure it's there, which is probably a good time to go over to Jade talking about homes. So what else do you think we can do in a practical way?
So for me, it's about, and obviously I would say this being, running STEAM school, it's about presenting children with really, really positive role models, girls, boys, and just that constant, they're searching for their role models on YouTube and TikTok, and that's what we're battling against in schools. So the more role models that we can present them who are in technical careers, will make it the norm, the better.
Thank you very much. Also on accessibility, I've been working with Neil Beck at NatSpec, and they've created the Techability Standards, which are your roadmaps for all accessible tech. So I've chucked that in. It's a great resource. I've spent hours and days and months and years doing it, but have a little look, that you'll like that. And then to Holly, what would you advise people to do to help close these gaps?
I've got two very brief points. And the first one is for educators and parents of families, try to build discussions about equality and human rights into all of your other conversations. Don't be talking about tech, science, STEM in an absence of conversations about, the Equality Act 2010 and human rights, and what those mean. And secondly, rigorously challenge misogyny, sexism, and gender stereotypes wherever you can. And the GEC is a brilliant place for you to start learning how to do that. So
thank you very much. And now we've smoothly gone slightly over, I'm afraid, but we always do. We always have too much to say on this. So just thank you very much for everyone who's stayed with us and listened. A huge thank you to my panelists, who I know are extremely busy. It's always great to talk with you. I've popped my email in, and yes, have a great rest of the day, Caitlin. I hope it goes well.